powerful music icons walks onto a talk show stage, already carrying a storm in her eyes. What happens when that storm collides head-on with one of television's most unfiltered and unapologetic voices? Before this moment spirals into something the view has never seen before, make sure you subscribe to Talk Flair and hit the like button right now, because what you're about to witness is a confrontation no one saw coming. From the second the stage manager whispered, "We're live in 10," a tension began humming beneath the studio lights, subtle, invisible, but unmistakable. Most audiences felt excitement in the walls of the view. Today, it felt like static. Cameras repositioned, whispers scattered backstage, and even Joy Behar tapped her cue cards against the table with a stiffness that didn't go unnoticed. And then, Taylor Swift walked out. Her heels clicked with purpose, not with the buoyant charm she usually carried during interviews. She wasn't smiling. Her jaw was set, her eyes sharply focused like someone walking into a room already aware of the strike waiting to happen. The audience erupted in applause, thunderous, joyful, unaware of the moment about to unravel. Taylor reached the table, exchanged quick smiles with Sunny and Sarah, but when her gaze reached Whoopi Goldberg, there was a flicker, just a flash, of something colder. Not hatred, not anger, something deeper, like a wound that had just been touched. Whoopi seemed unfazed. She gave a slow nod, leaned back slightly, and muttered into her mic, "This should be interesting." The second Taylor took her seat, producers signaled. The red light blinked. The view was live. Sunny took the lead. "Taylor, welcome back. You've had an unbelievable year. The tour, the awards, the global impact." "Thank you," Taylor said softly, but her voice was tight, controlled. Too controlled. Joy jumped in next. "And of course, there's been so much conversation online about everything you say, everything you do. People follow your life like it's a movie." Taylor responded with a polite smile, but again, there was something else brewing under the surface. Finally, inevitably, Whoopi leaned forward. "So," she said, tapping the desk with a single finger, "we have to address some things. Because lately, people are saying you're becoming a little too sensitive." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't smirk. She simply let the words float, heavy and sharp. The audience reacted with a soft ripple of gasps and murmurs. Sunny's eyebrows lifted. Joy glanced at the producers as if to say, "Here we go." Taylor inhaled slowly, like someone preparing not to sing, but to speak a truth she had been holding back far too long. "I don't think standing up for myself makes me sensitive," she said. "I think it makes me human." Whoopi shrugged. "Nobody said you couldn't stand up for yourself. But if every criticism becomes a personal attack, the question becomes, are you contributing to the drama or reacting to it?" And just like that, the temperature in the studio shifted. Taylor didn't look away, didn't blink. She simply stared at Whoopi with a steadiness that hinted at much more beneath the surface. "Is that really what you think?" Taylor asked. "That I create drama?" Whoopi folded her arms. "I think you know how to stir a pot when it benefits you. And I think sometimes your fans go after people just for doing their jobs." The audience reacted again, louder this time, a mixture of shock and discomfort. Even Sarah leaned forward, as if physically pulled into the tension. Taylor swallowed, her voice quiet but sharper now. "You have no right to say that." There it was, the line that cracked the moment open. Whoopi blinked, surprised for the first time. "Excuse me?" Taylor leaned in, her hands clasped tightly together on the table. "You just accused me of manipulating my fans. You said I encourage harassment. That is not only false, it's deeply unfair." Joy muttered, "Oh boy," under her breath, knowing the producers were somewhere backstage throwing their headsets. But Taylor wasn't finished. "For years," she continued, her voice trembling, not with fear but with conviction, "I've had to deal with narratives about who I am. That I'm calculated. That I'm dramatic. That I use situations for attention. And every time I try to defend myself, people like you say I'm being too sensitive. But somehow when other people speak up, they're being strong. They're being outspoken." Whoopi raised a hand. "Taylor, nobody said you can't be outspoken. I'm saying there's responsibility. And I take responsibility," Taylor snapped, surprising even herself. "I take responsibility for my words, for my actions, for my impact. But I won't take responsibility for strangers online who twist things into something toxic. That's not on me." Gasps echoed from the audience again, followed by an eerie hush. It felt like the air had stopped moving. The cameras angled closer, not zooming, but hunting, capturing every shift in expression. Whoopi leaned back in her seat, her face unreadable. So you think you're completely innocent? Innocent, Taylor repeated. No, but I'm also not your villain. The table went silent. The audience went silent. Even the overhead lights felt hotter, sharper, like the studio itself was leaning in to witness what came next. Producers were signaling frantically. Joy tried to interject with a joke about commercial breaks, but the tension was too thick to cut. Sarah reached out toward Taylor's arm, then pulled her hand back, unsure what ground she was stepping into. Whoopi didn't look away. Taylor, all I'm saying is… No, Taylor interrupted, her voice steady but burning. All you're saying is your opinion, and you're allowed to have it. But what you're not allowed to do is paint me as someone who weaponizes my fans just because I speak up. You don't know me. You don't know what I deal with off camera. And you definitely don't know what it feels like to have millions of people dissect your existence. A stunned quiet blanketed the room. Whoopi opened her mouth to respond, but the producers finally cut in through Joy's earpiece, and Joy practically shouted, "We have to go to commercial." The lights dimmed. The applause sign flashed half-heartedly. But no one clapped. No one moved. Not the hosts, not the audience, not Taylor. She sat there, breathing hard, her hands trembling slightly. Whoopi exhaled deeply, staring at her with an expression impossible to decipher. Anger, respect, confusion, maybe all three. And as the cameras cut away, Taylor whispered, so quietly only the table could hear, "This isn't over." The break felt nothing like a break. It felt like the studio itself was holding its breath, like the walls were waiting, the lights were waiting, everyone was waiting for someone to make the next move. The moment the red light on the camera turned off, a dozen producers rushed toward the table in a hesitant swarm, unsure whether to intervene or pretend everything was normal. Taylor didn't move. Her posture was rigid, shoulders tight, fingers interlocked so firmly her knuckles had turned pale. She stared straight ahead as if replaying the last 30 seconds over and over in her mind, questioning whether she had gone too far or not far enough. Whoopi broke the silence first. "You know," she said quietly, "I wasn't trying to attack you." Taylor turned her head slowly, her eyes still sharp. It felt like an attack. Whoopi sighed. "You're reading intent where there was none." "No," Taylor replied, shaking her head. "I'm responding to something that's been said about me for years. Today you just said it out loud." Whoopi leaned back. "You're a global superstar. Criticism comes with the territory." Taylor's jaw tightened. "So does respect." A producer placed a hand on the table between them. "Ladies, we're back in 90 seconds. Please, just let's keep things calm." But calm wasn't in the room anymore. Calm had left the moment Whoopi questioned Taylor's character on live television. Sunny shifted uncomfortably, adjusting her mic. "Taylor, are you okay?" she asked gently. Taylor offered a small, brittle smile. "I'm fine. Just tired." Joy leaned in, her voice low. "You want us to steer away from the topic? We can pivot. We can go to the tour, the music." "No," Taylor said firmly. "If we pivot, they'll say I avoided the conversation. We finish what we started." Joy hesitated. "You sure?" Taylor nodded once, her expression resolute. Whoopi watched her for a long moment, something thoughtful flickering across her face, though it was impossible to tell whether it was irritation or respect. "All right then," she said. "We'll finish." The studio manager signaled. 30 seconds. Microphones were rechecked. Cue cards reshuffled. Audience members whispered nervously among themselves, sensing the escalating thundercloud forming over the table. Sarah glanced at Taylor. "You know you didn't have to come in today, right? With everything online, everything people are saying." Taylor inhaled deeply. "I'm here because I won't let other people define the story." The red light switched on. "We're back," Joy announced, her voice steady but nervous. And before the break, things got a little passionate. A ripple of laughter moved through the audience, weak and uncertain. Joy continued. "Taylor, you were expressing how difficult it is navigating public scrutiny. We want to give you space to continue." Taylor nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, her hands no longer trembling but charged with purpose. "Scrutiny is part of the job," she said. "I understand that. I accept that. But there's a line between discussing someone's work and questioning their integrity." She turned to Whoopi, not aggressively but directly. "You crossed that line." The room froze again. Even the viewers at home could probably feel it. Whoopi clasped her hands on the table. "I said what a lot of people think, Taylor." "That doesn't make it fair," Taylor shot back. "A lot of people think a lot of things about me. Most of them aren't true." "You have influence," Whoopi responded. And influence comes with responsibility. So does a platform, Taylor countered. And your platform lets you shape narratives. When you imply that I manipulate my fans, that carries weight. Because your fans react intensely, Whoopi said. That's not an opinion. That's a pattern. Taylor leaned forward. My fans react intensely because they care. I don't control them. I don't command them. They're human beings, not an army I deploy whenever I'm upset. Sunny interjected carefully. Maybe what Whoopi is saying is that sometimes the reaction can be bigger than the intent. And maybe what Taylor is saying, Sarah added, is that she shouldn't be blamed for what other people choose to do. The audience murmured in agreement. Taylor exhaled, her voice softening slightly. Do you know what it feels like, she asked, to wake up and see lies about you trending? To see people dissecting your relationships, your friendships, your private moments? And then when you finally speak up, you're told you're doing it for attention. Whoopi didn't answer right away. Her expression shifted, just slightly, as if something Taylor said had hit a deeper spot. It's not easy, Whoopi said finally. I know that. I've been in the public eye for decades. I've had people say terrible things about me too. Taylor nodded slowly. Then you should understand why your comment hurt. A brief silence stretched between them. Look, Whoopi said. Maybe I worded it harshly. Taylor blinked, surprised at the hint of concession. But, Whoopi continued, I still believe we need to talk about the impact celebrities have on their followers. Not just you. All of us. And I agree, Taylor replied. But talk about the issue. Don't make me the symbol of it. Joy jumped in quickly, sensing the conversation becoming more constructive than chaotic. So maybe what we're learning here is that miscommunication happens even between people who are used to being in the spotlight. A laugh finally rolled through the audience, lighter this time. Sunny smiled. The important thing is that you're both discussing it respectfully now. Whoopi glanced at Taylor. Respectfully, she repeated with a small smirk. Yeah, I can do respectfully. Taylor's lips curved into the faintest smile. So can I. But just when it seemed things were de-escalating, Whoopi added, but I still think you're too sensitive. The studio erupted, half-shocked laughter, half gasps, half oh no she didn't. Taylor stared at her, stunned for a moment, and then her expression shifted, transforming from disbelief into something fierce, almost fiery. You know what? Taylor said, her voice low and steady. If caring about my mental health, my boundaries, and my truth makes me sensitive, then yes. I am, and I'm proud of it. The audience exploded into applause, loud, supportive, electric. Whoopi looked at her, eyebrows raised, as if she hadn't expected that response. Then she chuckled. All right, fair enough. But the fire in the room wasn't gone. It was building, growing, because despite the brief moment of levity, there was still something unsettled between them, something neither of them had addressed yet. And the next question Joy was about to ask was about to push everything straight over the edge. Joy Behar looked down at her cue cards, then back up at Taylor, then at Whoopi, hesitating, weighing whether the next question was worth detonating the tension all over again. The producers in her earpiece urged her forward, whispering, ask it now, even though her instincts told her this might be the exact thing that sends the show spinning off the rails. But The View wasn't known for shying away from uncomfortable conversations. Joy inhaled sharply. All right, she said, clearing her throat. Taylor, there's something else we have to address, because it's been everywhere online this week. And fans have been pretty divided about it. Taylor's shoulders lifted and fell in a slow breath, as if preparing herself for another blow. Okay, she said softly. What is it? Joy glanced briefly at Whoopi before continuing. The interview you did last week. The one where you talked about feeling isolated in the industry. A lot of people interpreted it as you calling out specific other artists. Some even say you reignited old feuds. The audience reacted instantly with a low wave of murmurs. Sunny and Sarah both stiffened, each sensing the shift. Even Whoopi's gaze sharpened like a spotlight focusing directly on Taylor. Taylor blinked, her jaw tightening subtly. I didn't reignite anything, she said. I talked about my own experiences. My own isolation. That's not blaming anyone. Whoopi leaned in, eyes narrowing. But you knew how people would interpret it. Taylor turned her head slowly, her expression unreadable. No, she said firmly. I knew how you might interpret it. The audience gasped again, louder this time, like a collective flinch. Whoopi chuckled under her breath. You're saying I'm twisting your words? I'm saying, Taylor replied, steady but fierce, that every time I'm vulnerable, someone finds a way to weaponize it. Sarah placed a hand lightly against her coffee mug, grounding herself. Let's not assume bad intentions. But Taylor wasn't finished. I spoke about feeling alone because it's true, she continued. People think fame makes you untouchable, but what it really does is isolate you. They don't see what happens behind the scenes. They only see what fits their narrative. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. So everyone else is wrong, and you're just misunderstood? Taylor stayed silent for a moment, long enough that the room seemed to shrink around her. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a tremor of raw honesty. Yes, she whispered. Sometimes I am misunderstood. Sometimes I'm judged for things I never said or meant. And sometimes people assume I'm the problem because it's easier than admitting the world likes tearing women down when they get too successful. The murmur that rolled through the audience wasn't shock this time. It was empathy. Sunny nodded thoughtfully. That's a very real issue, especially for women in entertainment. Whoopi folded her hands. I hear you, she said. But you also have to understand, when you say something, millions of people react. It affects the whole landscape. So you can't be surprised when people ask if you're aware of the ripple effects. Taylor stared at her. Of course I'm aware. I'm aware of everything. The praise, the criticism, the constant scrutiny. I know exactly how loud the echo is when I speak. Then you know why people questioned your intentions, Whoopi replied. Taylor's eyes flashed, not with anger this time, but with a deep, simmering exhaustion. I'm tired of my intentions being put on trial. Joy jumped in, sensing the emotion rising again. This isn't about villainizing you. It's about clarity. Taylor nodded slowly. Then let me be clear. I didn't mention anyone. I didn't allude to anyone. I talked about my feelings, my journey, my truth. And if talking about mental health and loneliness makes people uncomfortable, that says more about them than it does about me. The audience broke into applause, longer and heavier this time, filled with something protective, something supportive. Whoopi waited until the clapping faded before speaking again. You're very good with your words, she said, her tone neutral. Taylor gave a tight smile. I've had to be. But being good with your words doesn't mean people can't ask questions about them, Whoopi added. You say you're misunderstood, but sometimes people misunderstand because you speak in ways that sound calculated. There it was. That word. Taylor closed her eyes briefly, just for a second, as if steadying herself against a punch she'd taken too many times. When she opened them, she looked directly at Whoopi. Calculated, she repeated, her voice unusually soft. You know how many times I've heard that? That I'm calculating? That everything I do is some master plan? That I can't just be emotional or messy or honest without it being a strategy. Whoopi lifted a shoulder. You are a strategist. It's part of why you're successful. Taylor shook her head. Being thoughtful isn't the same as being manipulative. I didn't say manipulative, Whoopi corrected. You implied it, Taylor countered. And people will hear what you imply louder than what I actually say. Sunny stepped in quickly. Maybe this is one of those moments where intention and perception aren't aligning. But the conversation had already shifted, pulled into a deeper, darker emotional current. Taylor's voice took on a fragile edge. I'm not calculating. I'm surviving. I'm constantly thinking because the world doesn't let me breathe without analyzing every move I make. Whoopi's expression softened, just slightly, almost imperceptibly, but not enough to break the tension. Joy cleared her throat. Let's pivot a bit, she offered. Taylor, earlier you said something during the break about not letting people define the story. Could you explain what you meant? Taylor nodded, gathering herself. I meant that I've spent years being defined by headlines, by rumors, by narratives that other people shape. And now, finally, I'm at a place where I'm choosing to speak up instead of smiling through misinformation. And when I do, I get labeled sensitive, or dramatic, or strategic. That's the price of fame, Whoopi interjected. Taylor turned slowly toward her. No, that's the price of being a woman who refuses to stay silent. The audience erupted again, cheering this time louder, stronger, more fearless than before. Whoopi remained still, even thoughtful, but her eyes never left Taylor's. Sarah glanced between them nervously, sensing the energy spiking again instead of settling. And then Joy made the mistake, whether intentional or forced by the producers, of asking the question that would shove everything into free fall. Taylor, she said slowly, do you think Whoopi is being unfair to you today? The room froze. The audience stopped breathing. Taylor turned toward Whoopi. Whoopi waited, and the entire studio braced for impact. For a moment, the studio seemed suspended in silence, like even the cameras refused to hum, as if aware that Joy Behar's question had just crossed a boundary that could not be undone. The audience sat frozen, wide-eyed, holding their breath as Taylor Swift turned fully toward Whoopi Goldberg. "Do you think Whoopi is being unfair to you today?" The question echoed, lingering, crackling like electricity trapped in the air between them. Taylor didn't answer at first. Instead, she studied Whoopi with an expression that was neither angry nor defensive. It was something deeper, something honest. The kind of honesty that came with swallowing years of criticism and finally choosing to speak without fear of the explosion it might cause. "Yes," Taylor said quietly. The room erupted, not with applause, not with gasps, but with a stunned, collective inhale that pulled the air right out of the studio. Whoopi blinked, caught off guard, though she tried to hide it behind a slow lean back in her chair. Joy froze. Sunny lifted her hand to her chest. Sarah's lips parted in a silent "oh my God." Taylor continued, her voice steady and painfully clear. "I do think you've been unfair to me today. Not because you asked hard questions. Not because you challenged my views. But because you assumed the worst of me before I even sat down." Whoopi's jaw tightened, but she listened. "You implied," Taylor said, "that I create drama intentionally. That I manipulate fans. That my emotions are strategy. And none of that is true. It's not who I am." "Taylor," Whoopi began. But Taylor shook her head gently. "Let me finish." The audience leaned forward collectively, some nodding, some tense, all locked into the gravity of the moment. "I came here today," Taylor said, "because I wanted to talk openly about my experiences. Not as a celebrity, not as a brand, as a person, someone who gets overwhelmed, someone who's been hurt, someone who's had to rebuild her self-worth after the world tried to dismantle it. And instead of hearing me, you questioned my sincerity." Whoopi inhaled slowly, her eyes narrowing not in anger, but in introspection. "Taylor, I wasn't trying to pick a fight." "I know," Taylor said, "but that's the problem. You don't think it's a fight because you're used to being blunt, to challenging people. But to me, to someone who's constantly judged, it felt like you were dismissing years of struggles." A long silence stretched between them. Uncomfortable, raw, but necessary. The audience waited, eyes darting between the two women like they were watching history unfold. Then, to everyone's surprise, maybe even her own, Whoopi let out a slow breath. "Okay," she said softly. "Maybe I was unfair." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. Joy nearly dropped her cue cards. Sunny closed her eyes with relief. Whoopi continued, "I've been doing this job a long time. I've seen a lot. And sometimes, I forget that the people sitting across from me aren't invincible. You're right. Your life gets dissected far more than most. And I didn't consider how my words might feel after everything you've gone through." Taylor nodded, gratitude flickering in her eyes. "But," Whoopi added with a small smirk, "you are strong. Stronger than you know. And maybe that's why I push sometimes." Taylor exhaled, a genuine smile emerging for the first time since the beginning of the show. "Strength doesn't mean I don't feel things deeply." Whoopi nodded. "I get that." The tension in the studio began to dissolve, not instantly, but gradually, like a storm finally breaking after hours of pressure. The audience relaxed, some clapping softly, others whispering to each other about the vulnerability unfolding in front of them. Joy took a breath, stepping back into her hosting role. "Well, this is certainly going to be trending in about 6 minutes." The audience laughed, grateful for the release. Sunny spoke next. "What we've seen today is a real conversation. Not rehearsed, not polished, real. And people need to see that. The honesty, the vulnerability, the accountability." Sarah nodded. "It's uncomfortable sometimes, but growth usually is." Taylor clasped her hands together, her voice calmer now. "Look, I didn't come here to argue. I came here to speak my truth. And I appreciate that we're ending this respectfully." Whoopi offered a slow nod. "Me too. But the moment wasn't over. Not for the audience, not for the millions already preparing to clip, tweet, and debate the exchange." As the final segment cue flashed in the corner of the screen, Joy leaned forward. "Taylor, before we wrap, is there anything you want to say to viewers watching this right now, especially after a conversation like today's?" Taylor looked directly into the camera. Her face softened. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with unguarded humanity. "Yes," she said. "I want to say this. It's okay to stand up for yourself. Even when your voice shakes. Even when people misunderstand you. even when you risk being called dramatic or sensitive. Speaking your truth is not weakness. It's courage. The audience erupted again, standing this time, cheering, applauding, many with their hands over their hearts. Whoopi looked at her, long, reflective, and finally smiled a real smile. Well said. Joy signaled the approaching commercial, but the producers stretched the segment by a few seconds, knowing the gold they were capturing. And that, Joy said, is why conversations like this matter. Thank you, Taylor. Truly. Taylor nodded, her expression peaceful now, the earlier fire replaced with calm resolve. The red light dimmed. The microphones cut. But the room stayed silent for several seconds, as if everyone needed a moment to process what had just happened. Then the studio erupted in chatter. Producers whispering frantically, audience members reaching for their phones, the hosts exchanging looks that said everything without words. Taylor stood slowly, gathering herself. Whoopi rose too. For a moment, they simply stood there. Two women from different worlds, different generations, different battles, looking at one another not as opponents, but as people who had survived the same fire from different sides. Whoopi extended her hand. Taylor took it. A beat. A nod. A mutual understanding. But outside that studio, chaos was already erupting. Clips were being uploaded. Twitter hashtags were exploding. Comment sections were flooding. Headlines were drafting themselves in newsrooms across the country. Taylor Swift clashes with Whoopi Goldberg. Swift stands her ground on The View. The confrontation that shook daytime TV. And the world wasn't just watching. It was choosing sides. And now, viewers, it's your turn. What do you think? Was Taylor right to call out Whoopi? Was Whoopi being too harsh, or simply doing her job? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Talk Flair for more explosive, emotional, cinematic celebrity showdowns just like this one.